Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to The Solid Verbal, boys and girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrandt. I am joined, as always, by the beautiful, the 40-year-old. Have to get it in there.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Dan Rubenstein, sir. Welcome back. Another preview. How are you?
I'm great. It's been years upon years upon years of you being in your 40s with me trying to catch up. So, look, it was inevitable. Can I pull back? Because we're talking about the ACC here today, are we not? A number, countless fascinating? Is that the word? Fascinating things that
Correct.
we find to be kind of incredible to think about all of these teams in the ACC. You've been battling some throat issues.
I have.
You've been battling some, like a coughing tickle, and during our Pac-12 episode, when we got to UCLA, we edited out when you had to, like, compose yourself because you were coughing. But when you came back, if you listen carefully, if you go back, if you are a true fan of the show, you can hear Ty talking about the talent level at UCLA around Dante Moore. And it's almost as if it's choking you up. So I'm trying to figure out, if that happens today, what will make you fake emotional about the, like, if they could just protect Emmett Moorhead, Boston College might be more eligible. It's my favorite thing, that for you to get emotional about something that has almost zero emotion tied to it, and hopefully it's about the ACC today.
That's a little behind the scenes content.
Yeah,
man.
Of course.
That's Patreon content, Patreon worthy content.
Verballers.com content. Yes.
Man, I don't know what's going on with this voice. I'm just getting a little too into it, I guess. I don't know.
You're just most recent. Yeah.
Well, welcome back in. I am Ty. He is Dan. Subscribe, tell your friends about the show. We've got another Big Ten preview to do after this. We've got an SEC preview. We've got a Group of 5 preview. And I think along with the Group of 5 preview, we'll include Notre Dame as well, just to make sure we get all the teams that I know people care about.
That's true. There's a lot to get through with ACC. That Notre Dame is another one. Yeah, that would add some time. Yeah.
This would be a 2-hour and 40-minute show.
Yeah,
My
true.
voice does not have the pipes right now for that.
Yeah.
So we're going to do our best here. Thank you for stopping back on in. Again, subscribe, tell your friends. Also, out at verballers.com, the aforementioned verballers.com, we've got a new game out called Grand Total. You pick the over-unders, the win totals for 69 Power 5 schools. At the end, the winner gets a Solid Verbal prize pack. So going out, you got to be a Patreon Verballer in order to play. But going out to verballers.com, it's pinned to the very top, the instructions on how you can submit your entry. So we're excited about that. We've got a lot coming down the pike when it comes to Patreon.
Unless people are scared of competition, Ty.
Well,
is that what you're saying? That perhaps if you're not signing up, you're scared of competing. You're scared of putting your money where your mouth is. That you can say, oh, back in August, I told you, Tennessee. Yep. But you didn't compete. So don't be scared of competing.
We're out here, man. We're out here.
That's true.
We're out here. We have nowhere to hide.
That's also
you can
true.
at least hide behind an anonymous handle or something of that nature, but
yeah,
there's no excuse to not play at verballers.com.
Agree.
Daniel, we are doing a little bit of a different slant on our previews this year.
My goodness, how interesting, how bizarre.
What is that from? Is that Royal Tenenbaums?
Royal Tenenbaums, of course. That's Bill Murray's voice.
How interesting, how bizarre.
Yes.
What we're doing is we're counting the fascinating things that a conference has to offer us as college football fans in 2023. I am occasionally playing the ding as we count them out. I believe in the Pac-12 episode, we had 23 fascinating things. In the Big 12 episode, we had 29. We'll see what we get up to on this here ACC episode. Big picture, looking at the ACC, when we did our schedule preview, we talked about this as the All Costco Conference. Quality and bulk.
Quality and bulk.
Quality and bulk. What is the, I guess, top level main point of fascination for you with respect to the ACC this year?
There's obvious reason for upside. Obviously, my truffle pig analogy. There's obvious reason for upside for just about everyone. And I don't know that that means that this is going to be the conference most chock full of 8 and 4 teams, but it does seem like, I don't know if it's all Costco. I don't know. There's like an element of foreign bodies entering the system with the ACC. And I know that's true of every conference in the portal era. But when you look at Louisville, when you look at Clemson going to an outsider at offensive coordinator, when you look at Florida State and the sheer number of transfers on that roster, when you look at the new coordinators at Syracuse, there is like an element of bring your passport to the ACC. And I kind of love that. I don't know. I'm good with it.
You found upside with Virginia?
I did not study Virginia for this
Okay.
episode.
Okay.
No.
On that note, we'll get to
Ty, there's only
The
one
Who's.
direction to go for the Who's, right?
there is only one direction.
There's only
to go.
one direction to go. And that can be said, obviously, for Boston College's pretty catastrophic 2022. But yes, I think for an overwhelming majority of these teams, right? Like Louisville was ready for change. North Carolina, a lot of questions on that defense, but you know about the upside with North Carolina. NC State making the change at quarterback. Like there's a lot of shuffling going on. Again, not unique to the ACC, but I think the volume might be with how, like a lot of these schools are just like attractive places to attend college, which I think makes a lot of these places pretty significant destinations to try and improve your lot as a college football player. So that to me is super fascinating, the passport element to the ACC.
Yeah, I think where I came down on things was Florida and Clemson are very clearly the top two teams in the
Florida
conference.
State, yes.
Florida State, excuse me.
Yeah, you're
Heaven
good.
forbid, I should say the other Florida school.
Mm-hmm.
Florida State and Clemson. And it feels like everybody in the conference will be gunning for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that makes the ACC different from what we do last time, the Big 12. Everyone's going to be gunning for Texas and Oklahoma as well. Everyone's going to be gunning for USC and Oregon and some of those top four as we deem them.
Right.
In
Well,
the
it's almost
Pac-12 as well.
It's vintage ACC in that regard, right? Florida State,
But it
Clemson,
is.
at least at the moment. Yeah.
It's got a little bit of a vintage ACC quality to it. And I also think both Florida State and Clemson have enough questions, not as many questions as the other teams in the conference, but enough in their own right that, okay, if UNC comes in with an electric offense,
Mm-hmm.
can they outscore Florida State? Can they outscore Clemson? If Miami can put together a defense, what does it look like holding down some of the premier offenses in the conference? Pitt, right? Pitt is the sort of standard, I think, with respect to defense in the ACC, at least over the last 4 to 5 years under Pat Narduzzi. A lot of questions on the defensive side of the ball, but Pitt with an interesting defense, that leads to an interesting conversation, I think. Just if we're looking at this in terms of Florida State, Miami being the two schools that rule the roost, in the ACC, there are interesting matchups that we will find ourselves in, as we always do in the ACC.
Yep.
That will ultimately either determine whether or not Florida State or Clemson win, or by extension make the playoff.
Sure. I think that's right. There's going to be a team that I personally, on November 9th, I'm going to look up and say, wait, they're 8-3? Huh? Right? Pitt's 8-3? NC State's 8-3? There's always that surprise 9-3 team where you're just like, they've been playing a bunch of close games against nothing teams. I guess they've won all of them? So that's cool about the ACC this year. I don't know who exactly that team will be. I guess we can determine that by the end of the episode. Can I offer a subheading underneath my passport fascination with the ACC?
Of course.
Ty, are you familiar with the concept of marital swinging? If so, tell me to what degree.
I've read about it
in various encyclopedias and academic works. Sure.
Microsoft Encarta, yes. I am familiar with the term.
There is a good amount of transfer and job swinging interconference, right? With Phil Jurkovec and Frank Signetti moving from Boston College to Pitt. There's a big transfer, I think, a defensive lineman from Miami to Florida State, correct? Mm-hmm. You have Brennan Armstrong from Virginia to NC State. You have Robert Anai, who was Virginia, to Syracuse, now NC State. There is a good amount of interconference cozying, let's call it, that it might be true of a lot of other conferences, but there is that element of like once an ACC player, always an ACC player, and just hopping over to another school. I like that. Is Storm Duck, I think, North Carolina to Louisville? Is that true? I want to say.
Storm Duck
via
went
Penn State.
via Penn State.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a layover at Penn State. But yeah, there is that there is a bit of interconference cozying that I know you're much more familiar with the concept, but the marital swinging element.
The third point of fascination, I do need to play this here.
Yeah.
The ACC is divisionless this year. 14 teams, one conference to rule them all. We're not doing divisions anymore.
Right, that's true.
They are trend jacking here in a sense and hopping aboard the latest movement in college football, which is everybody gets rid of their divisions. So it will be the top 2 teams in the conference that play for the title. We are no longer moored to the divisional structure of the Coastal and the Atlantic.
I like that. A free form, free swinging lifestyle, Ty. I don't know why I keep going back to this. Well, but yeah, we like this because this offers up more varied competition year in and year out, that we're not locked into every year getting the same things. And, we're seeing it in the Pac-12. We're going to see some iteration of reorganization in the SEC and the Big Ten soon. Yep. Obviously, the Big 12 the Big 12 had the round robin format before when it was just 10 teams, but Pac-12. So I'm great with it, Ty. Love it.
You had Florida State and Clemson, the 2 presumed top dogs in the ACC. Which of those 2 teams is more fascinating to you? Not who's going to win. Yeah. Which of those 2 teams is more fascinating
Florida
for
State
you in 2020?
For sure, Florida State.
Why?
All right, I have down here Rolling in the Deep, which I think is an Adele song, Ty.
Yes.
There is nothing obvious about the Florida State roster. The continuity that we have at Florida State with now Alex Atkins and Adam Fuller returning as coordinators, Mike Norvell, obviously with his hands all over the offense and recruiting in a good place. We saw it last year with the losses that they suffered mid-season when they were beat up front on defense, that especially I think it was NC State and Clemson ran pretty roughshod. Louisville, I think, as well. Like that you could push Florida State around up front because of how thin in the middle of that defense they were when they were beat up. And so right now, and it's not even just a matter of the defensive line because they've gone after guys in the portal and they've fortified depth there, but there's no obvious clear weakness. They lose a couple of bits of star power and depth at certain places, but they addressed everything so aggressively in the portal. Like you could say, oh, well, they're thinner at receiver behind Johnny Wilson, but then Keon Coleman comes in from Michigan State. We're like, well, it seems that they've addressed that very competently. And so returning what they do at running back, returning what they do, and now they're going to use tight end more, of course, bringing in another stud transfer at tight end and Jaheim Bell. And the defensive line is as deep as it's been recently. The offensive line fully came into its own last year after however many years of suffering and being such a huge weak point. So to me, it's where can they least afford to get beat up during the season? It might be the secondary, though they've recruited pretty well there. There are decent quarterbacks on the schedule. To me, it's just a depth thing at this point for Florida State because they've been so aggressive in the portal. Recruiting has been good. I think they brought in their best wide receiver recruit in some time to help add, a change of pace and a bit more speed at receiver. So I guess it's just at a certain point, it's depth and getting at worst B+ Jordan Travis every week. If they do that, they're winning the conference. So it's, I don't know, getting 8 hours of sleep, plenty of water. That's the key for Florida State. Doing all your stretching, eating plenty of protein. That to me is the key, is taking care of business. Because otherwise, look, they're not Georgia. They're not Alabama. They're not Ohio State in terms of, 3 5-stars at every position. But up and down this roster, they're ready to win 11 games. So that's to me everything. It's good Jordan Travis every week and depth.
Their over-under is 10.
Yeah.
Clemson's over-under is 10 as well. To be fair, both could win 10 on the nose.
Yeah.
What we've said for a while now about Florida State, and again, I'll link up the schedule preview. September is really interesting because week one, it's the game of week one. It is Florida State against LSU neutral site in Orlando. And then week 4, they're on the road at Boston College. Week 3, they're on the road at Boston College. Week 4, they're on the road at Clemson before they go into a bye week. So for sure, we will know a lot by October for the Florida State Seminoles. I think what ultimately defines the season, though, is what they do the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And this was my point months ago. Florida State is not so much defined, at least in this current era, by what they do against the top teams, though everybody gravitates to how did they do against the top teams that they played. I think they're more defined by the others on the schedule, the Syracuse games, the Miami games, the Pitt games, the Wake games.
Well, they finish, I think it's at Wake, at Pitt, Miami consecutively, and they finish at Florida. And so that's the depth question to me, is what does that roster look like come the end of the season? Because look, they lost to Wake last year, I think by 10, I want to say. They lose to NC State at the gun. They lose to Clemson kind of thoroughly. I don't think the score was necessarily representative of it, but those are losable games. Going to Pitt, whatever the version of Wake looks like this year, and then obviously playing at Florida, whatever Florida looks like, that's a tough game. So,
yeah, my point is just that if you're Florida State, getting the program to a point where you're consistent enough with your talent and consistent enough with your schemes and with your output week to week, consistent enough to win those games and not lose a dumb one, that in and of itself is a quantum leap forward.
Yeah.
That's a big leap forward, right? We did the show, we talked about what's it going to take to get so-and-so to 10 wins. All too often, that's the answer to the question.
Sure.
It's not necessarily beating the great teams. It's not losing to the teams that you should beat. And that's where we're at with Florida State. I think Mike Norvell's done a really good job, and you're right to bring up how he has just infused the program with talent. It has been a slow build. I recall when he took over that program in the COVID year, obviously odd timing, but there was a lot that felt like it was going sideways. They hung with him. It seems like he invested time to build the culture of the program up. And now here we are a couple of years later talking about Florida State as presumably the best team in the ACC, potentially a playoff contender, and certainly a program with a ton of depth, not one that is seeing a talent drain, though guys have transferred out, but they are just taking on anybody who's interested in coming down to play. Like,
of course,
come on, and we'll fill out our two deep in a way that it hasn't been in years. It's great.
If Jordan Travis is not beat up this year, and they are not fully decimated at one position group, winning 9 games would be a failure for Florida State this season.
Yeah,
it would be an abject failure for Florida State to win 9 without something catastrophic happening to either Jordan Travis or a specific position group. And if they don't finish, if they're relatively healthy on offense, they don't finish with a top 10 national offense, abject failure. This is a team built to dominate on offense. I don't know when the last time you watched a clip of Trey Benson was, the Oregon transfer. I'd like to point out that Mario Cristobal didn't use. Had to get that in. He was beat up at Oregon. He's incredible. He's one of the 4 or 5 best running backs in college football. And so with that element to have Jordan Travis in play action, he should be hitting all sorts of fun stuff over the top. So, yeah, I expect them to have a top 10 offense. I expect them to be an incredible TV show. Honestly, I expect them to win the conference.
Okay, well, what about Clemson then? Let's stick with the top.
Yeah.
And let's go over to Clemson. So a fair amount of change for Clemson.
Yes.
This offseason, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Play the ding here for that one.
Please.
Because getting rid of Brandon Streeter, bringing in Garrey Riley, DJU transfers out, Cade Klubnik, now the guy. A lot of high-profile stuff to talk about.
Sure.
Clemson also has not followed the lead of its peers in the conference around college football at that top tier. They're just not doing the transfer thing. They really could have used a few transfers of the receiver position.
Sure.
Because
yeah.
That's kind of been the weakness, right?
Yeah.
The last couple of years, among other things, there's been inconsistencies that maybe you can get into. But I would have thought for sure receiver would have been ripe to bring somebody in. Surely with all the talent around whoever at Clemson, it's got to be an attractive spot. They just have not done that. So for me, I still have questions about the receiver position. It's a broader question about Dabo Swinney and how he approaches the transfer portal, but that's not anything new. Where are you at with Clemson? What is your point of fascination there?
By the way, receiver, typically a position you can get much better at just because of the sheer number of bodies who play receiver and enter the portal, quality guys. You see, A.D. Mitchell going to Texas and Keon Coleman at Florida State, who we just mentioned, all over the place. You can improve quickly at receiver.
You can improve quickly, and in Clemson's heyday, and I don't say heyday as a way kind of imply that they're past it. Clemson's still a top-tier team, but when I think we were more comfortable talking about Clemson as a national title team, that caliber team, they were loaded with receivers,
Yeah.
NFL caliber receivers.
Sure.
I just don't know if they're there. They could emerge, but at time of recording, late July, I'm not sure I know their names.
It's also Dabo's position group historically, right? That he came up as a receivers coach, and typically when the head coach takes a special interest in a position because of where he coached as an assistant, that's a strength of a team. And so, sure, Bo Collins is back and he was beat up, and it's Antonio Williams and Jake Brenningstool. Like, they've had guys, but did you watch Community, by the way? The NBC
A little
show
bit here and
Community
there.
with Joel McHale. Okay, so there was a character on that show called Magnitude. I don't know if you remember Magnitude. He had a catchphrase, pop, pop, okay? I have the fascinating thing, I'm right there aligned with you, is pop at receiver. Because that's what's been lacking for this team. Now, you talk about, look, DJU struggled and the offense took a step back and the offensive line wasn't where it was at the best of where Clemson was recently. And while they had good dudes on defense, there wasn't star power at corner in the same way. We saw Wake really take it to them. You could pick on Clemson a little bit in man coverage these past couple seasons. But to me, right there with you, pop at receiver, and it works nicely, the magnitude of the plays on offense, because this was a team that was still relatively efficient on offense. They improved last year under Brandon Streeter, but they weren't anywhere near where they were in the Jeff Scott, Tony Elliott offenses that were really humming. And that to me is the big thing that needs to happen, because I think the offensive line is going to be good. I think Cade Klubnik will likely take a nice step forward in Garrett Riley's offense. We'll get into him in a second. But it should be a balanced offense given where Garrett Riley was last season, with probably more interesting star power at receiver and running back overall. But who is scared of the Clemson receiver room today? I would say
I don't know.
Not many people in the ACC. Now, there's not a lot of terrific secondaries, and I think Garrett Riley is creative, and he will figure out ways to generate bigger plays than where they were last year with DJU and Brandon Streeter. But I don't think it's, all right, now they're TCU. I don't think it's turnkey like that for Clemson. So that's why I have Florida State ahead of them, because I just think there's more proven excellence on offense. Defense should be good. They're good at linebacker. They're very good at safety. There's a lot of, I think Xavier Thomas is 37 years old and he's still playing. There's a lot to like about the defense holding up its end of the bargain, not where they were under the best of Brent Venables, not where they were when they had 4, 5, 6, first round-ish talent on the defensive line, but that can be overcome with big plays on offense. And for the good of entertaining TV, I hope it happens for Clemson at receiver, and guys step up, younger guys step up, because it still seems to be sorely needed that Clemson doesn't have an obvious Quentin Johnston like TCU had, or even Tay Barber, who was terrific last year for TCU. They'll be creative, but the name that emerges, I still think is TBD.
Yeah, and look, part of, I think, DJU's struggles at Clemson, some of the inconsistency came from the fact that receivers didn't get open.
Yeah.
Either didn't get open, or the 50-50 jump balls that Clemson had grown really accustomed to throwing under Trevor Lawrence, and when they were maybe a little bit more successful, that play was not there. They didn't have the guys who could go up and win those types of balls, and it came back to bite them. Now, maybe they'll find it this year. I don't know. Perhaps the Garrett Riley system will unlock some matchup potential that gives them that arrow back in the quiver. I don't know. But I know it can't all be on Will. Don't call me Bill Shipley.
Yeah.
I like Bill Shipley. We're going to go Bill this year.
Ooh.
I like him. I think he is crazy bright. I think he is probably, outside of your boy Trey Benson, the best running back in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Not really much of a question in my mind.
Okay.
But he can only do so much. So whoever that target is out wide, he's going to have to step forward and announce himself relatively early on, so that Cade Klubnik has that target, and so that Clemson can maybe be a little bit more vertical in the passing game. That would be nice. The other thing that I would add about Clemson, Dan, is you mentioned the defense. I think you're right to point out that the defense is going to be very, very solid. I think it's a pretty tough schedule this year.
I was going to say, the back half especially, it is loaded.
It is pretty tough. We already talked about the Week 4 game against Florida State. They've got that one at home, which is a nice spot for Clemson. But there's at least one tough game each month with a marquee opponent. They've got Florida State in September. They've got Notre Dame as you get into, I guess, October, and then North Carolina later in the year. All those games are at home, which is nice for Clemson, but at South Carolina to close out the year, that'll be a tester, a revenge spot for Clemson after losing last year. There's also a few traps on here, right? I look at Syracuse on the road a week after Florida State. Who knows what frame of mind Clemson will be in after that game.
Well, Dabo and Syracuse have some baggage together, yeah?
They got some baggage, yeah, and that's my point. So, I don't know. There's a lot here with Clemson. I would be inclined to say that Clemson is more fascinating, though I think Florida State is better because there are just more storylines to me, more things in flux on the Clemson side, if I'm being honest from my chair. But both teams for sure, I think, have earned their right as the top two, at least perceived top two in the conference.
By the way, it's at Miami, at NC State, and Notre Dame consecutively on this schedule, correct?
Yeah, right.
And then it's North Carolina a week before South Carolina, to whom they lost last year, correct?
That's right.
Okay. That's if Clemson has patched up the holes, it'll show itself to be pretty impressive back half of the year.
Yeah, and I would not at all put it past Dabo and this offense, and especially this defense, to just rip through this schedule. I could totally see a world in which that happens.
Sure.
I don't know if I'd want to touch the over 10, if indeed it is 10. In our grand total game, we only did have games, so it's going to be one or the other. You don't have that option for a push. But in the real world here, 10 I probably wouldn't touch. There's just not enough wiggle room there.
Okay. But quarterback and defense in a good spot. That's my rubric.
Yeah. Where should we go next?
Oh, man. Okay, so I did both of those teams. So let's go to another perceived power tie. Let's go to Miami, okay?
Ah, yes.
Let's go to Miami just because in terms of fascinating things, you have a lot to choose from here, okay? I've put up, you've got quite the buffet of fascination.
I do.
Where are you going with the Canes?
The Canes 5-7 last year.
Yeah.
So you say perceived power, not from last season.
Right.
We're talking back like turn of the century, right? That was the last time Miami was an actual power.
Yeah.
Their over-under is 7.5 this year. So Vegas, I think, is a little bit unsure of what to make of Miami, especially after last year. Definitely expected more from the defense a year ago, and ended up giving up a ton of big plays. Couldn't create big plays on offense, but ended up giving up a ton of big plays. Miami fans will especially remember that Middle Tennessee game. They gave up 4 plays of at least 70 yards. They were weirdly symmetrical with the big play thing, which no one's really fully explained in any of the preview content I looked at, but the passing game really was lacking. Tyler Van Dyke, whom we really liked before the season, big letdown there. He's hurt as well. So just a lot, I think, bottomed out for the Canes last season. My fascination, or should I say hesitation, this year with Miami is with the phrase, quote, "they're too talented."
Okay.
Did you read anybody talking about Miami saying they're too talented to go 5-7 again?
Right.
You read any of that? Because I did.
Of course.
Too talented. Miami is too talented to fail the way they did in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand where people come from there because they got to be better. They brought in more talent. One would assume they got to be better because they're more talented.
Mm-hmm.
And now they've got the right coordinators in place. That's another trope with Miami. Now the right guys. Mario's got the right guys in place, right? I don't necessarily disagree with that logic. I'm just not willing to assume it as fact, Dan.
Okay.
If we would have assumed it last year, we'd have been horribly wrong. Bill Connolly said it was the worst team Miami fielded since 1970. So I think this team is better. I think. I'm not confident, but I think this team's better because of the talent, because it's been built in a very Mario Cristobal way from the lines on out. Kind of the Cristobal special. I think both lines will be special, or at least more special than we saw last season, and that's a good thing. On the offensive side, they bring over Shannon Dawson from Houston. He saw the same numbers that we did, and when they asked him about it, he says that they've got to throw the ball downfield a little bit more, and they've got to generate pop.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's looking at the same spreadsheet I'm looking at. I don't know. But what we know about Shannon Dawson is that his offenses are pretty good at pumping out 1,000-yard receivers. So if he can continue that trend, that would be good news for Tyler Van Dyke. That'd be good news for the receiving core. I'm not blown away by the receiving core, if I'm being honest, but it's easily top half of the conference, and frankly, that's good enough to hit the over 7.5.
Sure.
So in theory, somebody like a Colby Young will pop. Xavier Restrepo out of the slot, he can eat. If this offense that Shannon Dawson is bringing to Coral Gables can kind of follow the trend, then presumably the offense is going to be a lot better. Now, we said that last year. Josh Gaddis, didn't he win the Broyles Award? We thought he was going to be
Miami.
He
didn't. Yeah,
not for Miami. He did, and he's gone.
Yeah,
he's up at Maryland now.
Mm-hmm.
So offensively, I think is really my main point of intrigue. However, defense is often overlooked in the Miami conversation in the preseason here. Now, they did go out and get a different defensive coordinator, if only because Kevin Steele went to Alabama. Kevin Steele, in his own right, is pretty accomplished. He's been around a long time. Everybody seems to have a hot take about Kevin Steele, but he wouldn't be at Alabama if Nick Saban didn't at least think that the guy knows what he's doing. So right. I'm a little hesitant to just pin it all on the coordinator. They had the wrong guy, and now they got their guy in there with Lance Guidry. I'm not willing to jump to that conclusion. But they did poach Lance Guidry from Tulane days after he was poached from Marshall. In theory, the defense should be pretty solid. They've got 3 guys back up front. They've got 3 of their top 4 linebackers. They've got James Williams and Cameron Kitchens back at safety. Yeah. Also, a bunch of transfers, a bunch of high school recruits in. I think these are guys that can all step in and make an impact. The Lance Guidry defense, at least as we know it at Marshall, was very, very solid. It was a statistical machine, and it will look very similar in that they're going to stick with the 4-2-5 base. Maybe run a little 4-3, but by and large, it's going to be the same base set that Kevin Steele ran a year ago. Lance Guidry's job will be trying to get more out of that. So what is my point of fascination with Miami? My point of fascination with Miami is the too talented to fail thing. It is... They've now got new coordinators in there. They've now got more talent in there, both of which to some extent felt true last year, and they bottomed out. Mm-hmm. So is it a new and improved 2.0 version of it this year, or are we entering into a situation where we're going to be disappointed again? If you go through the schedule and try to pick out the most likely losses, you're going to get to 3 or 4, and that's it. But the danger with Miami, as it is with some of the other teams that I think we talked about, right? Florida State, I made this point. What you realize about the state of the Miami program is that it's not losing to the top teams. It's losing to the not so obvious teams. Right. That is what will ultimately fell them if indeed it goes the way of last season. So I kind of like the over Miami. I'm buying the Canes right now. If you look at DraftKings, you can get plus odds on over 7.5. And given the fact that there really truly are only 3 teams, in my opinion, on the schedule that are more talented than the Canes, in Texas A&M, Clemson, and Florida State, I think they stand pretty good shot of hitting that over. I don't think this is a 7-5 team. I think 8-4 is about right. Maybe 9-3 if things really break their way. I don't think it's a talent problem anymore. I'm skeptical it was a coordinator problem last year, but
it was pretty clearly a coordinator problem last year, along with an injury problem, along with a talent problem. Yeah, there was like 7.5 problems last year.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I'm hesitant to say it was just a coordinator problem.
Fair.
And I feel like a lot of the narrative that I've read here in the preseason has been just that. And that now they've got their guys and coaching, and they've got their guys on the roster on the 2 deep. They're loaded. They've brought more of the Mario guys in. They're going to be just fine. I'm not willing to assume that as fact quite yet, but certainly they need to get healthier. Certainly if they've got, their ones out there from start to finish, they'll be in a better place. So I'm heavy on Miami over, and I didn't think I would be. I came into this very skeptical of the Canes in 2023. I came out of this liking them more than I expected. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's there for them. look, it's there for them. Could they beat Texas A&M week 2?
Sure.
I think A&M's got more talent, but the game's at home.
And Coral Gables, yeah.
Game was close last year. We still don't know what the hell the A&M offense is going to look like. That's a winnable game. That could be one of those where Miami sneaks under the radar. I don't know. We'll see.
If Miami wins fewer than 8 games, it's a failed season. I've seen Tyler Van Dyke, when healthy, play college football. I've seen Colby Young play college football. I know what is coming in along this offensive line and what returns on this offensive line. At the very least, they should be okay. They should be okay. They were not last year. They should be okay. They should be able to run the ball. This should be a relative strength of the offense. Like you mentioned on defense, if they're limiting big plays, which they should be doing, they're deeper than they were last year, and hypothetically, they should be better coached with a better fit at coordinator. We'll see. The culture should be better than where it was last year after reports of a not great behind-the-scenes situation. So
That's right.
Fewer than 8. I think is you look at the schedule and there are, what do they have, Florida State and NC State in consecutive weeks on the road?
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's balanced out pretty well.
It's okay. And it seems like it's there for them. You mentioned the offensive line. Miami's got top tier in terms of the ACC offensive line.
And 2 of the absolute best offensive linemen coming in from the...
Yeah. So I think it's Florida State,
class.
It's Clemson.
Yeah.
Duke has a really good offensive line. I would almost be inclined to put them above Miami. But beyond that, it's Miami.
Sure.
They're really good along the offensive line, and I think that should bode pretty well for hopefully keeping Tyler Van Dyke upright and healthy and maybe unlocking that ground game a little bit more.
Yeah. If they don't win 8 games this year, I don't know what the conversation is around Miami and Mario Cristobal. He has a long contract. I don't know what you do with this team if they don't win 8.
All right, where do you want to go next?
Okay. We've gone 2 pretty clear powers. We've done a perceived power that has the opportunity to improve dramatically. Let's go Pitt. Why not? Let's give a nod to Pitt, who always seems to be pretty good, if not really good.
I jotted down, excuse me, that Nard Dogg's greatest trick is convincing idiots like us that he doesn't have the horses.
Yeah. Little old Pitt.
Little long-winded,
yeah.
Right? So Pitt's in a new cycle right now because they're leading passer, rusher, receiver, star pass rushers, and both starting safeties are all leaving the squad.
Mm-hmm.
That's from Bill Connolly. More specifically, they lose 4 defensive linemen. They lose their leading tackler at linebacker and 2 all-conference defensive backs. So that's a problem for Pitt because it's no secret that the bedrock for this team is the aggressive, attacking style defense that I love to make fun of, but it's really been solid for Pitt, especially along the defensive line. The defense over the last 4 years has been lights out. I think to the point where it feels like Narduzzi's got a formula down, right? And it's not something we worry about, frankly, year in and year out. We just kind of assume Pitt's going to have the defense, and if they have a baller offense like they did when Kenny Pickett was there, then maybe they'll win the conference, go to a big bowl game.
Right.
If not, then what's the floor? 7, 8, maybe 9 wins. They were 9-4 after the bowl win last season. Last season, the offense was pretty much entirely dependent on the running game and Izzy Abanikanda, who's not there.
Yeah, dude. He was so fun.
He was so much fun. They did not get what they hoped to get out of Keaton Slovis. Keaton Slovis now playing for BYU. So as we enter 2023, it definitely feels like the cupboard is more bare in the front 7. And that is concerning because of what the defense typically would mean for this team. I don't know if it's fully bare. It's just more bare than it's been. And I don't know if we have any surefire gravitational stars that everyone's talking about in the preseason. Last year, we talked a lot about Kalijah Cansey, and he got drafted into the pros. This year, I don't know if we have that guy. So maybe he'll emerge because Narduzzi's been very good at developing them over the course of time.
Mm-hmm.
But the situation, I think, in and of itself is very fascinating because we get to see Pat Narduzzi in something of a different circumstance in his time at Pitt. They've just always had those guys. Now he's got to develop them. Now, I'm fairly confident he will find a way to get production from that defensive line unit, but not going into the season knowing who the guy is going to be, that's a little bit different.
Well, maybe you don't. Different. He might.
He might. He might.
I think he has 100% earned the benefit of the doubt. All they do year in and year out is find dudes to harass quarterbacks. That's what they do.
But in terms of fascination, I don't know who he is.
Right.
You don't know who he is.
Right.
All of the preview pubs I read, they don't know either.
Right.
Maybe Nard Dog does. Mm-hmm. I don't know. So the second thing is they brought Phil Jurkovec back home. So Pitt has kind of this track record now of not being able to recruit the talent from Western Pennsylvania out of high school, but then after that talent goes elsewhere and doesn't play or doesn't like the setup, they come back home.
Right.
And they've been doing that for a couple of years running now. Phil Jurkovec is the latest. Frank Signetti came over from BC last season. Now this season, he's bringing Phil Jurkovec. Phil Jurkovec, Frank Signetti in their 1 year together at Boston College, the best season of stats that Jurkovec has had in his time.
Yep.
So they're hoping to bring the band back together.
Healthy, yeah.
Healthy, right? Hoping to bring the band back together. It is not a star-studded cast around him by any stretch. I like their options in the backfield. Derek Davis, by the way, another one of those Western PA kids. In his case, went to LSU. Now he's transferring back. Mm-hmm. I think he's a nice option for them in the backfield. But like Jared Wayne has gone out wide. The receiver thing is kind of a question. So this is all a very long way of saying that Pitt is on, I think, more unstable footing than they have been in a while. I think that Pat Narduzzi has earned the benefit of the doubt with defense. I like the Jurkovec transfer to an extent. I just don't know how I feel about the pieces around him. So a lot of uncertainty. The over-under is 7 for the Pitt Panthers. I don't think there are 5 losses on the schedule. So there might be a speed bump initially trying to figure out the defense and breaking in some new guys. But worst case scenario, I think, if all fails, they are 6-5 going into the last game of the year at Duke, which is winnable.
Is it?
Which is winnable.
Duke's
I think
good.
It's winnable.
Okay.
Duke is good, but I think it's winnable. So also a very good home slate if you're a Pitt Panther season ticket holder. You've got Cincy at home. You've got North Carolina, Louisville, Florida State, and Boston College as well. They've also got the backyard brawl in Morgantown. They have to go to Blacksburg. They have to go to Notre Dame. So it's not an easy schedule per se, but I don't know if I feel great about more than 5 losses. So that's where I'm at with Pitt.
So you look at the schedule and you say to yourself, I say to myself, if Phil Jurkovec is pretty good and stays healthy, if the developmental cycle on defense continues, if somebody emerges at receiver, because Jared Wayne is gone, right?
Yeah.
If somebody emerges at receiver, if the offensive line can stay healthier than where they were last year, if everything just goes pretty well, they win most, if not all, of their close 50-50 type games. You're like, oh, Pitt could go, provided all those ifs, 9-3, 10-2. Florida State, Notre Dame, I think, are consecutive weeks. But otherwise, you don't look at that schedule and say, man, they got this team and then that team and then this team and then that team. It just never stops. You don't say that, right? No. And Pitt has been one of the most consistent teams in this conference, so that if Pitt continues to be Pitt, which I think is there's a good likelihood that Pitt will continue to be Pitt, they shouldn't lose 5 games on this schedule. I like the over a lot for Pitt because it just seems to pay off.
It seems to pay off. I do have a fair amount of trust in Pat Narduzzi, but I want to emphasize just a little bit here if I can.
Please.
This is a little bit of a different situation.
I totally hear you.
The cupboard is more bare. It's not totally bare. There are guys that he's going to get production from the line. We know he will. But it's just more bare. There are fewer surefire difference makers on that front line. And that's our cause for pause. For
how many definitively B+ defenses will a healthy Phil Jurkovec play against this year?
He'll play Notre Dame. He'll play Florida State.
And Louisville. And maybe Duke.
Yeah.
That's like 2.5, 3.
No.
That's an awesome starting point from my vantage point at this moment. Yeah.
No, I don't disagree.
Okay.
Where are we going next?
Let's go NC State. They're fascinating to me because they also fit that Pitt mold of, generally speaking, you know what you're getting from NC State, from a Dave Doran team, and that is good to very good defense with NFL-level talent and interesting offenses that don't necessarily have that magnitude, that pop, right?
So let me ask you a question here.
Yeah. So what's the fascinating thing specifically? Is that your question?
Well, I'm getting there. But coordinator change, Robert Anae comes down from Syracuse. Brennan Armstrong comes down from Virginia. This has been, in most of the preview content that I've seen, kind of heralded as the thing that could take NC State to an interesting place in 2023. Do you feel that way? Do you feel that reunion of those two guys, given what else they've got in the roster, let's say,
right,
is that in and of itself enough to spark curiosity and fascination for you?
If I were a team rooting for an offense mired in phone booth tendencies, which NC State has been, even the best of Devin Leary a couple years ago was a lot of shorter stuff. NC State wasn't a stretching the field type team. The best of Robert Anae, what we saw last year with the development of Oronde Gadsden at Syracuse at receiver, with Garrett Shredder, as you like to call him, and Sean Tucker at their best. They were very balanced. They were very dangerous these past couple years. Obviously, what he did with Brennan Armstrong and Keaton Thompson, moving them all over the field, was super fun to watch at Virginia a couple years ago. I'd be thrilled with it. Now, would it be hot fudge and cherry on top if the offensive line were ready to be talented enough to support these ambitions? Yeah,
hot fudge and cherry on top.
Yeah,
I'm jotting this down.
Yeah, they're probably more of the ice cream, and the fudge and cherry are more the splashiness of an explosive offense. So yeah, right now it's Robert Anae as not a mercenary, but let's call him like the Basher Tar, right? Isn't that Ocean's 11? Nice little December 01 reference for the kids out there. The explosives expert who comes in and does his best to hold up his end of the bargain. So I'd be happy with it. You have, look, where they were last year with how beat up they were with Devin Leary and MJ Morris and Ben Finley. Like, if you have a guy, you know his ceiling. Now, where they are at receiver and running back, I don't know. It's still TBD. They lose star power on defense. To me, it's going to come down to offensive line. It's going to come down to creativity. And in that swinger lifestyle, that ACC swinger lifestyle with Robert Anae, 3 ACC teams in 3 years, I'm good with it. I think there's enough upside to gamble on with this offense. But no, where they were along the offensive line last year was bad. And they're trying to be better, but that's my concern, that there is that sort of imposed ceiling because they haven't been able to figure it out these past couple years. And I like Tony Gibson running the defense, but they're only going to go as far as the pop takes them on offense, it seems to me, this year, which still might be 8 or 9 games, granted. Like, you look at the schedule, I don't know.
I mean, really good home road splits.
Yes.
There are 5 road games. They're at UConn, Virginia, Duke, Wake, and Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
You could do a lot worse than that in terms of your road slate.
Yeah.
They also have at home Notre Dame, Louisville, Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina.
Yeah.
So this gets back to the age-old question that we talked about when we did these big previews. Like, would you rather have the hard games at home or on the road?
Right.
I guess that depends on whether or not you think you can win. If you think you can win, you'd want them at home.
Yeah. And it's Duke, Clemson, Miami, Wake consecutively. Yeah. Continue.
Duke, Clemson, Miami, Wake consecutively. That's right.
With a bye, I believe, between Duke and Clemson. But no, I'd much rather have the winnable games at home, and that's where I get a little bit apprehensive about NC State's chances this year. They're going to a bowl game. They're not winning 7, I don't think. I think they can win 8 games.
They're over under a 6.5.
Yeah.
And at time of recording, just looking at these odds here, it looks like the public is pretty heavy on the over 6.5.
Look, I'm fine with, Brendan Armstrong had a terrible year last year. Everything about the Virginia offense was terrible. I'm fine with saying offensive upside, despite my line concerns, and what should again be a good defense, even losing some star power. I think it's just ahead of 80% of the ACC, so I'm good with it.
You mentioned Virginia. Should I do Virginia quick?
Let's do it.
3-7 last year. Obviously, tragedy struck that football program. That's why they only played 10 games.
Yeah.
The over-under this season is 3.5. Last season, the point of intrigue last season, I won't ding it for this, is that Tony Elliott, an offensive mind from Clemson, came in and the defense got better.
Yeah, well, they hired the dude from Air Force, right? At coordinator,
They hired the dude from Air Force, and the defense got better. The offense fell by 101 spots in the SP+, all the way down to 117th. The defense, by the way, up 64 spots. Mm-hmm. So the point of fascination, I guess, I'm shrugging on video, I guess, is what tweaks are they going to make on offense? Because quite literally everything is uncertain at this point on offense. You could argue that they might be worse, honestly worse, this season due to transfers and all the attrition that they've had on the roster from last season. The defense will be okay. I think the defense will be fine. It's just hard to see how Virginia's offense gets better. And there's no clear-cut reason why you should expect that they're suddenly going to emerge and be able to run the ball the way that Tony Elliott wanted to run the ball, or be able to throw the ball the way he wanted to throw it. He came in and wanted to make things a little bit more balanced. Remember when Brennan Armstrong was kind of putting up these pinball
threw
numbers?
The hell out of it, yeah.
Yeah, they threw like crazy. It was very wide open. He came in and tried to button it up a little bit more and make it more balanced, and that just didn't take. So I don't know. Like, I like Chico Bennett on the defense.
Good name.
He's a fun player. Great
John Rosinski, by the way, is the defensive coordinator.
John Rosinski.
Has a name.
Yeah. But it's a tough schedule. It's a bad team, certainly still a bad offense. And I hate to paint the picture of doom and gloom for Virginia, but I think there is a chance it only gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, are they active in the portal? Like, it just doesn't seem like the efforts to overhaul were all that successful.
They haven't been so far.
Yeah, and maybe it's a tough thing. It's academics, whatever. But yeah, the offensive footprint is catastrophically bad from last year.
The interesting stat that I saw is that talent and this also applies to Virginia Tech. Maybe I can knock them out quickly as well.
Mm-hmm.
The talent in the state of Virginia has gone up per recruiting rankings.
And it's also gone elsewhere.
It's gone elsewhere.
Yeah.
Both Virginia and Virginia Tech have struggled to keep that talent home. We know that's been one of the points of Brent Pry's fascination on the Virginia Tech side, trying to keep some of those guys home. And we talked to Andy Bitter. That was one of the points he brought up. Like, given where the program's at, you understand off the bat, you're not going to reel all of those guys in. But you got to start somewhere. You got to reel a couple of them in. You got to build some momentum, and then maybe that will lead to better things to come down the line.
Yeah, not ideal when they all go to Penn State.
Well, that's just it. That's just it. When James Franklin talked about dominating the state, it's hard to know if he was talking about Pennsylvania or Virginia. He's been very effective at bringing up Virginia talent. But Virginia is kind of in this weird cycle right now where they got to get the offense on track. And hopefully the next time we have this conversation in 2024, when we preview the Who's, it'll be much more certain ground that we're talking about. But right now it feels like almost everything is problematic. Almost everything is uncertain. And again, I don't want to be doom and gloom. I'd love to be truffle pig with you.
Yeah.
I just I don't know what I'm sniffing out in the dirt here that's going to make me feel better about the Who's on offense.
Yeah, and it's the thing too is last year they had to be especially great in the red zone on defense. So it was a little bit of bending and not breaking, and so that was, part of why they were so successful on defense last year and did make that jump. 116th, 3 and out percentage on offense. Eventually, you're just not going to have the legs on your linebackers, your defensive linemen, whatever, to play so much if the offense can't stay on the field and string together successful drives. And so that's obviously, among concerns with Virginia. But yeah, need to get a lot better. And look, how long ago were we talking about some really damn fun Virginia, like even before Brennan Armstrong, Bryce Perkins, Virginia, that ended up in the ACC championship game with a ton of offensive skill talent, especially at receiver, little guys, but it just has fallen off of a cliff completely.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame. But We get to see Keaton Thompson again this year. He's back.
It's unbelievable that he's still a college football player. It's great.
Still like their only receiver. But
All right.
on the Virginia Tech side, by the way, we're up to 17, let's say. Virginia Tech, 3 wins last season. Their over-under is 5.
Mm-hmm.
The problem last season was turnover, roster turnover, right? And when we say that they didn't have the dudes, they literally didn't have the dudes.
Yeah.
I remember doing the preview a year ago, and we talked about all the position changes that Virginia Tech was making
Horrible
at the time.
Yeah.
Right. Which is always like a certain number of position changes is normal. That happens every offseason. But when the coaches are framing it as such like, wow, we can't believe how many guys are playing out of position. I guarantee you that many guys were not out of position. Say what you want about Justin Fuente. Maybe he wasn't a great recruiter. He wasn't that bad of a coach that everybody was out of position. They did it out of necessity.
Yeah.
So the offense was really bad. The defense played really well down the stretch. They ended up as a top 40 unit. No surprise, Brent Pry is a defensive guy. That's what he does. They still don't have the guys, Dan. They still don't have the guys. And the most interesting preview content I read about Virginia Tech came from our friend Brett Cianca from Pick 6 Previews.
Okay.
And what he talked about on offense, and I hadn't seen this mentioned anywhere else, but it really makes sense. Tyler Bowen was the offensive coordinator who came in from the pro ranks and had more of a spread background. And they paired him with Joe Rudolph, the offensive line coach, with the background from Wisconsin, which was obviously more power run. And something between those contrasting styles did not mix. It didn't work. The power run with the spread concept, whatever it was they tried to do, it took them to a point where they basically had no identity.
Right.
And so now Joe Rudolph went to Notre Dame, right? We talked about that a little bit in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
My point of fascination really with Virginia Tech is, are we going to see more of those spread concepts, and what does that look like? Do they have the ammo to run that style system? Will be a more conservative, pulled back version of the spread? What is Tyler Bowen going to make this offense look like? And furthermore, how did they scheme around what looks to me to be a lot of roster deficiency? Good coaches can do that. Good coaches can scheme around wherever their holes are on offense. There's just a lot of holes to scheme around. And I don't know if Tyler Bowen in year 1 as the offensive coordinator he didn't instill us with that sense of confidence that he knows what it takes to kind of make this thing work. I don't know. But that to me now, kind of the fully unmoored, fully unrestricted, let's say, Tyler Bowen, if in fact that's what we're getting, what does that scheme look like? The other thing is the schedule. You came up with the tagline "Miss Murder" on our schedule preview podcast. The toughest road game is Florida State, at Florida State, the first weekend of October, which is certainly a very difficult game. But otherwise, they've got Rutgers, they've got Marshall, they got Louisville, they got BC, and Virginia for the Commonwealth Cup. Their toughest home game is Pitt.
Mm-hmm.
So as schedules go, this isn't bad. Virginia Tech is, I think, a prime candidate for a team that, like UCLA, if I want to use another example.
Right.
Obviously, they're in different spots as programs, but it's prime candidate in that the schedule, pretty favorable, could be a team that ends up being worse than their record at the end of the season. I know when I did the schedule preview, I was pretty in on Virginia Tech as a possibility of getting to 6 wins. After doing this, I am decidedly not.
Right.
Brett Pry knows defense. I think they will remain plucky on defense. Offensively, I hope they go with Kyron Drones,
right,
the Baylor transfer, because I feel like I and you,
we got a good
everyone,
sense of Grant Wells. Yeah,
like we know what the ceiling is
right.
with Grant Wells. So I hope it's Kyron Drones. Just start over, give it to somebody else, and let's see if they can get more upside. Because certainly, if you're going to try and run a spread offense, I don't trust Grant Wells in that setup. I just don't. We'll see.
My only final note on Virginia Tech is it's so weird that they're like a gloss over team. They're a glossy team.
It sucks, right? It sucks.
How many fans of teams in the ACC are looking at their schedule and looking like, well, that's a win, that's tough, that's lost, that's tough on the road, and you're glossing, I'm glossing. Hopefully I'm wrong to gloss But you treat Virginia Tech like Virginia, like Boston College, like we used to treat Duke, like, we sometimes treat Syracuse. We're like, well, there's a win. It's Virginia Tech. There's a win.
I mean, what we're
wrong.
saying about Virginia Tech is that it's a tough place to play. And that has always been true.
Yeah, well, it's not tough if they're not good. Yeah.
It remains true. It is a tough place to play. It's an odd place to go.
I guess.
If the team is going to be this toothless on offense, that's a problem. They were plucky in spots last year. It felt to me, there were close games down the stretch.
They fought. Yeah.
They fought. And so if anything is to be determined from what we saw last season, 3-win campaign, the fact that it didn't feel like the team was giving up, I thought was positive.
Sure.
But, that's big time truffle pig right there. That's big time. We're looking for bright spots in an otherwise really underwhelming campaign.
The starting point of their defense and how they kept them in games last year is nice.
Yeah.
But there's just nothing on offense right now. It seems.
It seems. Yeah. It seems like this is going to be another rough offensive campaign. But look, maybe removing that conflict among coaches, and that's not to say it was contentious. That's not what I mean. But removing kind of those contrasting styles, maybe that will give them more clarity and an identity, and they can kind of build around that and move forward. But I'm going to have to wait and see on that one, man. I don't know enough at this point to go with that.
Can we talk about because we talk about consistencies, we talk about powers, we talk about perceived powers. Can we talk about the shocker that is Duke football under Mike Elko?
Oh, man.
Because I don't think another team kind of fits that. Like, there were teams that fought near the end of the season, like Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech. But otherwise, they're the only team I think you can qualify as, like, unexpectedly fun and cool, which is not something you talk about with Duke as a university or football.
I mean, they won 9 games last year after the bowl. They were 8-4 regular season. They won the bowl.
Yeah.
To finish 9-4. Their over under this year is 6.5, and I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Because I think it speaks volumes about Duke football for me to sit here and say that my point of fascination is the schedule. It's the schedule, and it's not a lack of talent and coaching on offense or defense, but it's the schedule. And how long has it been for Duke football since we could say that?
Yeah.
Like we come into the season actually feeling pretty good about where they're at because they won 8 regular season games in the bowl. It was their best regular season since 2014. And it did not happen solely because of a weaker schedule, but they had the 93rd toughest schedule in the country. Just bullet point. I'm going to a place with this conversation, I promise you, where we're going to come back to that. But the best teams on that slate were North Carolina, Kansas, and Pitt. This year, in stark contrast, they opened with Clemson. They've also got Notre Dame, Florida State, North Carolina, Louisville, even the upstart UConn Huskies, who won 5 games a year ago, whatever it was. Don't sleep on the Lafayette Leopards either. Week 2, never know.
Never ever sleep on the Leps.
So the reason the over-under is 6.5 is because it's a tough slate.
Yeah.
And it's tough to truffle pig your way into
you love it. See? You just keep going back to the truffle pig well.
I'm going to have oinks on the board next time.
Snout looking for upside in the dirt.
Yeah. It's an interesting point of fascination whenever you've got an upstart program, which is basically what Duke is under Mike Elko now. And then suddenly they get a huge schedule upgrade, and it gets much, much harder.
Well, and people are just much more keenly aware of Duke's upside. Right. They took teams by surprise last year. Yeah.
Not necessarily going to sneak up on you in the same manner. So I think it speaks volumes about where Mike Elko's gotten this program. It was 1 year, by the way. It was his first year.
Yeah.
To win 9 games with Duke is like incredible.
Yeah.
So I think he's done a really good job. This is the same team from a year ago, which is the other point of fascination. They've got 8 starters back on both sides of the ball, including Riley Leonard, who was the breakout star of the offense and certainly the team. He's got his entire complement of skill guys back. Kevin Johns did a great job coaching this offense last season. There's no reason to think that Riley Leonard's going to take a gigantic step back. Maybe he'll regress a little bit, but Is he like the third best quarterback in the ACC right now?
Could be. Absolutely could be. Yeah.
Behind Drake Maye and Jordan Travis?
Mm-hmm.
We know more about him than we do Cade Klubnik.
That's true.
So preseason,
he's in that conversation. Phil Jurkovec at his best. We'll see.
Yeah.
Garrett
but Riley
Schrader
Leonard
with
the season he had last season, and certainly with the talent around him this year, you got to feel really good about where the offense is at. Defensively, Dwayne Carter back along the defensive line. He made a big decision to stay put, which should help that Duke defense. Duke was solid defensively last year, and that was a direct byproduct, I think, of Mike Elko taking over. Really good against the run. Top 2 defenders are gone. They brought in some reinforcements via the portal. Mike Elko was somewhat aggressive in the portal. And he's one of the bright defensive minds in the game right now. And they're going to need every bit of that up against a really tough schedule. Really tough schedule.
How much money is Mike Elko going to be paid by a Big Ten team in 2 years?
I know.
Michigan State head coach Mike Elko. Penn State head coach Mike Elko. Michigan head coach Mike Elko. Like, he's going to make so much money in the Big Ten in 2025. Or in the
SEC. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, he obviously was at Notre Dame, so he has the Midwestern footprint, was at A&M, has that. Obviously has spent a lot of time in North Carolina, but he is going to make so much money if this continues at Duke.
First thing is the schedule.
Yeah.
The schedule is, it's just going to be interesting to see what they do against a tougher slate.
Yep.
Second thing is basically everybody's back.
Mm-hmm.
The conventional wisdom is that the record's going to be worse because the schedule is harder.
Mm-hmm.
And there are enough sure thing caliber teams that I think Duke is starting with 4 losses. Can they go 7-1 against the rest of the field and hit their over? I think that's asking a little too much.
Okay.
So I'm not at the point yet where I say that the roster is deep enough that they're going to be consistent enough against those other mid-tier teams. And they're going to go, 8-4 again against this, or 7-5. I got him at 6-6. I don't think I'd touch the over, but I think Duke could be, if I talk about Virginia Tech maybe being a team that, because of record, ends up with a better record than team, I think Duke could be shoe on the other foot, where the record does not indicate how good of a team this is, just given the caliber of the schedule.
You know how many games they lost by double digits last year? 0.
Yeah.
4 games by 16 points, Ty.
That's
so
right.
We're not even just talking, and I love this way of looking at the season for Duke last year. We're not even talking about a Duke team that was incredible with the number of games that they won. That, I think my phrasing at some point in April or something was, they were a gust of wind away from being 11-1 last year.
They were.
With their close losses. So
they were.
Yes, it's important to look at it via the lens of what their schedule is and that nobody's sleeping on them, and it's more difficult, it seems, right now. But if we're thinking they're going to play decent defense under Mike Elko, if we think that Riley Leonard is one of the best, or even a top half quarterback in the ACC at worst, again, they're starting ahead of a lot of teams right now.
We still have to knock out Boston College.
Okay, that'll
Georgia
be quick.
Tech, Syracuse, Wake Forest, North Carolina, and Louisville.
Okay, let's talk North Carolina.
You want to talk North Carolina?
Yeah.
North Carolina. Man.
It's
Drake
easy.
Maye.
This is very easy for you, Ty. You can go through North Carolina in 45 seconds. They don't have a defense. Drake Maye's awesome, but he has a new coordinator, and they lost star power on offense, and the offensive line was terrible last year. It doesn't look like they're going to get much better on the offensive line this year. Soccer-style kicker.
What do you think of this tagline? I jotted down Gene Chiswick, more like Serene Chiswick. Am I right?
No, not like that, Ty. This
No?
lasts forever. The audio is your record.
Look, you're right. If you're not a Carolina fan, you're going to watch because of Drake Maye.
Of course.
Right. But for me, it's a fascination with defense, particularly one stat on defense.
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina was 128th nationally in havoc rate.
Okay.
Havoc rate. I love havoc rate.
I like
we
it
talk
too.
about it all the time. Havoc rate, for those of you newcomers here, it's just a measure of how many times is a defense getting tackles for loss, or forcing a fumble, or breaking up a pass, or intercepting a pass. If you've got a high havoc rate, that's good. If you've got a low havoc rate, that means that you're North Carolina, right? That's what it means. You're not doing any of that stuff. and you're not creating plays. Instead, the offense is more bringing it to you. I don't have the sound at the ready. Maybe I should have been more prepared, but North Carolina's been the cure for the common offense. We used to make that joke about Mac Brown at Texas too, but North Carolina, last couple years, the defense has gotten worse. They are the cure for the common offense. If you're a bad offense or a struggling offense, if you're Virginia Tech, you want to play North Carolina. Do we think Gene Chizik can solve this, Dan?
No. Not with the full secondary leaving and them not bringing in interesting enough talent on all three levels to make up for it. No.
They still have Cedric Gray. He's the linebacker who led all of Power 5 in tackles last season. So that's a good building block in the middle of your defense.
But why did he have to complete all of those tackles? Yeah.
Exactly. I like him.
Yeah.
And I like pieces here. And Power Eccles is a great name at linebacker.
Yep.
I think they'll be okay at linebacker, generally speaking. But in the secondary, especially, as you said, Tony Grimes, Cameron Kelly, Storm Duck, they're all out. Transferring in are guys from Virginia Tech, Georgia State, East Tennessee State. Elijah Huzzy was an All-American at East Tennessee. Maybe he'll be great.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I don't know if I like the whole rubric of rubric's the wrong word, but formula of your guys transferring out and guys from smaller schools transferring in. I don't know if that's necessarily the formula here that leads me to a place of more confidence that the defense is going to develop better, because it's been the same story now for a couple of years. New names are not going to develop necessarily better than the old names, at least not in the current coaching staff.
Gene Chizik, by the way, called arguably the worst red zone defense in America last year.
Yeah, he did. So Ed, I'm not confident that he can solve the problem. Right. In the words of Dan Rubenstein, my trusty co-host, can they develop the dudes? Just made that
Do
up.
I say that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, okay.
I jotted it down on my note sheet here. I don't know why.
Okay, that's okay. It was probably a late night sesh.
It was. I don't know if they can develop these guys. The schedule's workable. There's very much an Oklahoma feel to this, a USC feel to this, in that the defense doesn't need to be 2021 Georgia because the offense is going to be so damn good with Drake Maye. It just will be.
We think.
We know that. No, I know that.
Okay.
I'm confident that the offense is going to be very, very good with Drake Maye.
Okay.
They're also bringing Chip Lindsey in as the offensive coordinator. I think they will tap into a little bit more of Drake Maye running the ball as a feature, not just something that he has to do.
Okay.
And I think that will make him all the more dangerous. Phil Longo, who was the offensive coordinator, he went to Wisconsin. That's why Chip Lindsey is there. So I think that the offense will be in a very, very good spot. They have 4 starters back up front. They have 2 solid tight ends. They've got solid running backs back. Out wide will be a little interesting because there are transfers. Nate McCollum comes up from Georgia Tech, and they got a guy from Kent as well. So they're going to have to feel that side of things out. But by and large, it's Drake Maye in the offense. And much the way we talked about it, honestly, with USC, can he do enough to kind of counteract the defense, which I'm just not at all confident they can solve with Gene Chizik.
You want to talk Louisville real quick?
Yeah, please.
Everything's new. Everything's new in the Ville, Ty.
Yeah.
New coach, new quarterback, new receivers, new linebackers, new defensive linemen. I'm sorry, I'm swatting a fly right now if you're watching the video. New DBs. Schedule's great. And Jeff Brom was especially good for Purdue in his first year there, taking over a down program. And Louisville had a nice defense last year, but I just think offensively where Malik Cunningham fell to after what he started out as was pretty disappointing. I know he was beat up, but he should have been a great college football dual threat quarterback, and it just didn't pan out for him in the Louisville offense.
Does it, even though there's a lot new, doesn't it feel like Louisville is still like a really good landing spot for Jeff Brom, that maybe he caught them at a point where the program is trending in a good direction. They just didn't do enough to be consistent.
But is it good for Louisville, right? I think it's good for Jeff Brom. His track record at Purdue is pretty mixed. His offenses were very specific. They had some of the worst rushing performances in college football these past couple years. That worries me a little bit if he's going to be this like big, bright offensive mind that his reputation would have you believe. And so I don't know. I'm mixed, but here's what I like about Louisville. I like that they're extremely aggressive in the portal, going all over the conference, all over the country, recruiting nationally. They are spending like they want to win 10 games once again, which I think is terrific. I think it's good for the ACC. I think Louisville is a fun program when they're operating, and it hasn't been that long as a power. Defensively, there's a lot to replace. Offensively, they bring in a bunch. I'm just the sort of calling card of those Jeff Brom Purdue teams were like star power at receiver, right? David Bell, Rondale Moore, guys like that.
Yeah.
Jack Plummer has the experience in the Brom system. He goes to Cal last year. He's back. Pierce Clarkson comes in as a heralded freshman. But Brock Doman had some time last year. Not that good. I think there's a lot to like, and I think the schedule is such that they can win a bunch of games if they're fine. If Jeff Brom is the cure for the common Satterfield kind of thing, that he comes in there and it's just a more professional atmosphere. If they're bad against this schedule, it's like the NBA Summer League thing where, like, if you're bad against Summer League competition, that's a bad sign. If you're good against Summer League competition, who knows? But that would be my worry right now. They have to be good this year. Even with as many new parts as they have, they have to be good. That you spend for Jeff Brom, you bring him home. I like him. I don't love him, right? I think there's guys to like on defense. There's just too many new faces right now for me on offense to get me too confident in where they're going to be medium term, but I think they should be fine.
8 is the over-under.
8 is the over-under. Let me pull up their schedule. I lost the window. I'd probably go under just because of the new faces. I still think they're going to be good. I still think they're going to give good teams problems. They have Notre Dame at home. They have, at Pitt, at NC State, at Miami. It seems like a balanced enough schedule, but yeah, Indiana, Murray State, Georgia Tech.
No Florida State or Clemson.
No Florida State or Clemson or North Carolina, so they missed Drake Maye for whatever that's worth.
And a very bizarre setup that we called out.
Kentucky at home, yeah.
When we did the schedule preview, Louisville has a listed 5 road games, but 2 of them are neutral site.
Mm-hmm.
They've also got Georgia Tech in Atlanta and Indiana at Indianapolis. So those are 2 neutral site games. Only 3 true road games. We've also got 4 games on either a Thursday or Friday.
You said the over-under was what once again? 8?
8.
I'd take the under just because it's year one. I like the schedule a good deal. I still worry about the amount of newness for Louisville in year one.
What about Wake Forest? They're new at quarterback. Sam Hartman transfers up to Notre Dame.
I'm out on Wake.
Yeah?
I'm out on Wake
feeling
after
the claw fence and the slow mesh.
It's the wakiest team of all because, look, losing Sam Hartman to Notre Dame, it's Mitch Griffiths coming in, replacing A.T. Perry. They have promise. The thing to like about Wake is it's a very specific system. I'd like it to be a very specific, successful system on defense as well. They've been very bad defensively. And so I don't think they're falling off a cliff. I still think they're likely going to make a bowl game. I just see them as 6-6 right now. Like every week is going to go similarly. They're going to be a pain for some teams, but they'll beat them. They'll be a pain for some teams, and they'll lose to Wake. I don't know. I think they're a toss-up team right now, and so I've met a well-coached toss-up team, but without the defense, without obvious stuff. I think they have good guys at receiver. I don't know. I have them at 6-6.
Is Wake Forest better or worse than Syracuse this year?
I think they're likely worse. I think Syracuse can be 6-6, 7-5. Here's the thing about Wake. They have a stretch starting in week 5 at Clemson, at Virginia Tech, Pitt, Florida State, at Duke, NC State at home, at Notre Dame, at Cuse. It's unforgiving after September. And depending on how you feel about Virginia Tech, but it's on the road at Virginia Tech. So that's the fascinating thing to me about Wake is if Dave Clawson if he gets to 7 wins with this schedule, he's going to get another raise.
He's coach of the year.
Yeah. And so that's the thing to me. That Syracuse and we can get to them as an easy transition next, right? They make a very, I call it tantalizing defensive coordinator hire in Rocky Long, the legendary 3-3-5. I don't know if he's an innovator, but he is somebody who has popularized and had a ton of success running that. And I think they're better at quarterback and star power at receiver in Syracuse with Garrett Schrader and Orlando Gadsden. So schedule-wise, home field advantage-wise, upside with defense-wise, I think Syracuse is in a better place, even with how just awful Syracuse was up front last year. So, yeah, I'd put Syracuse above Wake, albeit I'll put Dave Clawson over Dino Babers.
What is your biggest point of fascination with Syracuse?
Oh, Rocky Long.
Rocky Long.
A long-time successful head coach at San Diego State, goes to New Mexico to coach for Danny Gonzalez, a protege of his, replacing Tony White, another protege, another San Diego State 3-3-5 guy who goes to Nebraska. Look, Syracuse loses a lot of guys that they depended on the back half of that defense. They lose Sean Tucker on offense, who was a terrific running back. Offensive line, we'll see, but that is just in terms of fascination. If they can get better up front, because all you had to do against Syracuse was run directly at them and through them and by them.
That's right.
They prevented big plays last year, but they didn't prevent intermediate plays, which you could get at will against the Orange. So that to me is the fascination. If Rocky Long truly in his 70s can take a defense with obvious deficiencies up front and immediately fix them. Because if they can get off the field, they become a lot more interesting. Because that gives them defense and quarterback. And I like Garrett Schrader. I do. I know you're mixed on him, but I think he throws himself at a defense pretty admirably, both on the ground and obviously throwing the ball. I like him. I think he's a gamer. I think he can win 50-50 games. I think he can lead a Syracuse team down the field, down 4 with 2.5 minutes left. I like him. I think he's actually kind of underrated in terms of this quarterback list in the conference. The best of Sean Tucker, the best of Garrett Schrader, I like. But, yeah, it's just the defense. Because you can't stop the run. You can't do much in the way of winning.
No.
So that, to me, is the fascination. Rocky Long, and can he spin that magic 3,000 miles away from San Diego?
I'm, in terms of spinning that magic, let me close out my grouping of teams with Georgia Tech and Brent Key. Recall, they fired Jeff Collins. They bring in Brent Key as the interim first, and then they gave him the permanent job. Came out hot under Brent Key, beat both Pitt and Duke, but then ended the season losing 4 of 6 last year, finished 5-7, didn't make a bowl. But one of those wins was against Carolina.
Scrappy.
Actually, interestingly enough, here's one for you. 3 of Tech's wins last season. 3 of their 5 wins were over 9-win teams.
Yeah,
So-
I remember they were like the Purdue of the ACC. I don't know who that's more insulting to. Continue.
A lot was wrong, not the least of which was the injury bug. They had a lot of that. But there is, I think, a renewed sense of optimism that Brent Key got the job. He seems to be the one who wanted it the most. He's obviously got deep ties at Georgia Tech. They're probably not making a bowl with this schedule. This is a tough schedule. I also don't think that's the goal this season. The goal is to build a 2-deep and get this roster to a point where, it's more competitive. I think Brent Key, in his own right, has done a pretty good job of improving that aspect of things by the portal. They got to get to a point where they're recruiting out of high school better, and they're not just recruiting out of the portal. And that will be tough in the state of Georgia. However, I think it's possible. It's a talent-rich state. And bear in mind that Jeff Collins took over trying to convert that system away from the option. And sometimes we've seen it before at other places. It takes time to convert from a very specific system like the option
but he
over to something else.
He recruited well. He recruited players, especially on offense.
I know.
Look, their
I'm
quarterback started
it.
for Nebraska. Their running back was an All-American caliber running back for Alabama last year. Yeah.
I'm truffle pigging this
I know, but let's not get bogged down on option stuff. That's years ago now.
Haynes King.
Yeah.
I apologize in advance to our Georgia Tech brethren out there, but this is intended as a ricochet shot at Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah.
Okay. Haynes King was supposed to be capital T, capital G, the guy at Texas A&M. I remember doing the interview with Sam Conn Jr. maybe before last season.
Yeah, before the 22 season, yeah.
Where he was like, Jimbo just loves Haynes King.
Yeah.
Haynes King, like they complete each other's sentences. He just gets what Jimbo wants to do.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't work. Haynes King got hurt and got crowded out of the depth chart. His numbers weren't good otherwise, but is this the rare litmus test now where we get to see how bad Jimbo's offense really was at A&M? Because if Haynes King comes over and lights the world on fire or lights the world half on fire, that doesn't reflect very fondly for Jimbo.
Do you think Haynes King will light the world on fire for Georgia Tech this year? I'm ready with receipts if you are, because I don't believe that to be the case.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think that at all.
Yeah.
I think it'll be better than what they had.
Okay.
And I think the offense is a new beast. I think the transfers are a new beast. I think they're basically putting this together on the fly. The new offensive coordinator got experience calling plays at Southern Miss, Arkansas State, and Middle Tennessee.
Yep.
Buster Faulkner is his name. He was recently an analyst at Georgia.
Yeah. Well regarded, as far as I can tell.
Very well regarded. Yeah, seems willing to tailor the offense to the personnel. So it's going to look different this year, and I think that's a good thing. That's all to say talent on defense is a separate conversation altogether. That's going to be a real problem. They got hit really hard in the transfer portal on the defensive side of the ball. So the over-under is 4.5. I wouldn't go near it. But again, the point is not necessarily the bowl. Bowl would be immaculate against the schedule. It's pretty tough. The point is not the bowl. The point is to build up roster depth and to just try and establish some damn momentum here.
Yep.
Because every year under Jeff Collins, it was like, all right, the same thing again. And I liked Jeff Collins. I liked what he was trying to do. It just didn't take flight. So maybe Brent Key, the Georgia Tech legacy, can establish things in a way that Atlanta superfan Jeff Collins could not.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's close it out with Boston College, Dan. Last one. I've got, let's say, 26 points here.
26 so far, so this will be 27.
27. And then we'll get to 29 again.
All right. So we'll
do our previews
I have
and
my fascinating Boston College thing I have down is Boston Beef. Which that's a calendar that you were producing for many years. The Boston Beef.
Before the podcast.
That's how you made your living.
Boston Beef.
O-line was awful for Boston College, almost historically so last year, and they could not run the ball for long stretches of the season. Obviously, Phil Dracovic hurt, so people were stacking the box. Emmett Morehead came in, was actually pretty promising. I believe he's from California.
I like him. I'm calling him capital M this year.
I think he's good.
I really think he's good.
Oh, this is bad that we're already so in on the Boston College quarterback.
I really like him, though. I read the same stuff you did, and I went back and watched. I think he's really good.
Yeah, he's behind a not great offensive line. Defense, they make a change at coordinator. Their coordinator from last year left. They hire internally. It's co-coordinators. I don't think they're that good. I think he's good, and unfortunately, he might be like a candidate to go elsewhere. And this is sort of everywhere was sort of talking about this being a make or break year for Jeff Hafley and this staff after going 3-9 last year. I just think that's the issue with Boston College. And if you don't have the line, you don't have much. That should be a position group in the Northeast that you're able to develop and recruit to relatively well. And they've just fallen off. So, interesting talent at receivers. Zay Flowers on to the NFL, of course. But yeah, the star power isn't great on offense. They've got a couple great pieces up front on defense, but depth isn't there. I think they'll be okay. I think with a couple breaks, they could get to a bowl game, but it's going to require, playing teams with injured quarterbacks. It's going to require, freaky plays at the end of games, a 50-50 situation for BC. But it's at least a nice starting point to have guys who can rush the passer and have Emmett Morehead.
Are we both going Florida State Clemson in the conference championship game?
So playing and then rematching?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. It's boring, but yeah.
The game's at Clemson. Does Florida State beat Clemson in week 4 on the road?
Does Florida State beat Clemson on the road? I'm going to say no.
I think they do.
I think it's too difficult a place to play, and Clemson beat them last year on the road. So
yeah,
hypothetically, it should be easier for Clemson at home to win this game with what we perceive to be a more dependable quarterback, a new offense, and an experienced defense. I think I'd give the advantage Clemson there. I don't know what the line, if there's a line that's been released for that game in Death Valley.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to venture a guess,
4.5.
I would say it's pretty even right about now.
You think the line is even? That it's like a
I
point
would say
and a
it's
half?
about even.
Okay.
Yeah. It might be in Clemson's favor, if only because of where the game's being played. But I think it's pretty even.
Okay.
In terms of point spread. Maybe 3 points one way or the other. I think it's Florida State Clemson for the title. I think Florida State beats them on the road. I could also see Florida State losing week 1 to LSU. Game of the week.
Sure, of course. And they can lose to LSU and still beat Clemson.
Yeah. I just, Florida State's got so much back, and I really like their veteran leadership at quarterback. I spent 2 years talking down Jordan Travis.
I know, Ty, but now you're going too far the other direction for likely. Yeah.
This is a really good team. So
Yeah.
I'm on Florida State in the ACC. I'm on Florida State over Clemson. I don't know if they go undefeated. I don't think they go undefeated, but I think they win the conference this year. I think this is the year they finally get back to the top of the ACC mountain.
All right. So we sort of agree.
29.
29 fascinating things about the ACC. Quality in bulk, the All Costco Conference, swinger forward, ACC.
Capital M.
Capital
Emmett Morehead.
Emmett Morehead. And your voice seems to be intact. Full circle.
It's petering out, man.
Is it really? I'm sorry.
It is. No, we made it. This is the limit. So with all that being said, let us know your thoughts on the ACC.
Yeah.
In 2023, make sure you hit subscribe and follow and tell your friends about the show. Please refer the show to your friends. If you're still listening, if you like what you heard,
yes,
go on out to Spotify and leave us a comment or a star rating. Go on out to Apple Podcasts, leave us a positive 5-star review. All that stuff would be very, very helpful. Verballers.com is where you can play Grand Total. You can also get in on the fun and get access to our bonus perks. We have yet to fully reveal what we've got planned for this college football season. We'll be doing so in very, very short order. We're excited about the Patreon offering this year. We're changing things up.
I agree.
We're, I think, making it more accessible than ever. It'll be fun.
And look,
a lot of fun this year.
By all means, do not go to verballers.com and play Grand Total if you are not somebody who competes, right? Somebody who's shying away from competition. I don't think this competition is for you. I don't think this contest is for you. But if you're somebody who is positive, you have a read on these over-unders, I think you got to go to verballers.com immediately.
I agree. For that guy over there, my good friend, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildebrandt, thanks again for downloading, for listening, for playing along at home. We'll talk to you, 2 days, Dan? We're doing the Big Ten. Big Ten's next. Stay solid.
Peace.